Hi, my name is Megan and this is Lying Around Sewing. I like to make vlogs, tutorials, anything to do with Artist Alley convention stuff. And if you've been here before, welcome back. So glad you're here. Today we're going to be making an Among Us plush. This guy is so fun to make. I miss making him. I have a link down below with the free downloadable pattern that you can print off and follow along with the rest of this video. Once you've printed off the pattern, you can go ahead and cut it out. You should have a total of 7 pieces. And here's some other things that you will need. Scissors, needle, thread, some pins to hold your patterns in place or your fabric in place. Here's the colors I'll be using. The good thing about this pattern is you don't need a whole lot of any material. I like to use black felt for the face cover piece, gray fleece for the face piece, white felt for the reflection piece. I'm using a red fleece for the body and the backpack pieces. And with the main color you're using, you can get a half a yard of fabric and get about 3 plushies out of it. So get whatever you feel comfortable with, but just know you don't need that much of anything. Now let's pin this down. So I'm actually using a scrap piece of fabric, so even if you just have a little bit of fleece laying around your house, odds are you probably have enough to make this plush. I could go ahead and pin this down. To do that, you're just gonna push down in your paper pattern and come back up, catching the fabric in the back. But because I have what's called a rotary cutter, it's like a fabric pizza cutter, I can cut this out so much faster. And you're just gonna go along the edges of your paper pattern and cut around it. The good thing about my patterns is I include seam allowance in them, so you don't have to worry about cutting bigger than the pattern. Just cut the exact measurement and you're good to go. I like to get this paper pattern close to the edge as I can so that I don't waste any fabric. If you're somewhat new to sewing, I have the way that the stretch of the fabric should go. So looking at this piece, your pattern piece should lay on your fabric with the stretch going this way. And that's exactly how it is. You can see that it is stretchy this way, but if I turn it, there's no stretch. Stretchy, no stretch. Also have how many you need to cut. So this is cut 2, and I have 2 pieces. All right, now we should have our 4 main pieces cut, and that is in our color that we want our Among Us plush to be. Now let's move on to the face part. I have my gray fleece laid out, and for this pattern, you only need to cut 1. So I'm gonna unfold my fleece so that I only have the 1 piece, and we're gonna make sure our stretch is going this way. And it is. And again, I want to get this all the way over so I'm not wasting any fabric. Get our rotary cutter and just cut along the edge. I like to push the limits of my rotary cutter. Most of the time you use it to cut straight lines, but I like to see what all I can cut out with it before I switch to scissors. Now let's switch to our felt pieces. The other ones were fleece. This is felt. This one is also cut 1. This is going to be for our face cover. It's going to go over that gray piece. And I am going to pin this one down, even though I'm going to use my rotary cutter. But the way that we cut this one out is going to be a little different because we have to cut out the inside area. So first we're going to cut the outside.
we're gonna cut the inside. You could use the rotary cutter for this, but for me, I'm gonna use scissors, and I'm actually going to fold this over so that I can still see the paper pattern. And I'm gonna cut around the paper pattern. See, it's not perfect, but we can fix that up. We're just gonna go around it, not taking off too much, just flattening that edge. Now on to the last piece we need to cut. You don't even need this big of a white piece of felt. And you can just pin it to the fabric. This is also cut 1. And I'm just gonna take my scissors and go along the outside of it. Perfect. Now we have all our pieces cut. Let's see what it looks like. These should be the pieces you have. 4 of the red, 1 of the gray, 1 of the white in felt, and 1 of the black in felt. Now let's see how we're gonna assemble it. The first thing we're gonna do is take the face piece pattern, and so that you know where to put the white reflective piece, you can mark it with a washable pencil. You can also take a tracing wheel and trace around it, or you can also just eyeball it. Now you're ready to sew your first thing. For this plush, we're gonna be using mostly a sewing machine with a little bit of hand sewing. And for this particular piece to sew on, I'm gonna be using white thread and white bobbin. Using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of these pieces, mostly just going around the edge of your pieces. And your piece should look something like this. Now we're gonna take the top part of our body piece and making sure that this is on the right side. To check this on fleece, you can pull the stretchy part, and the way that it folds over means that this is the right. It'll fold towards the wrong side. So this is the right side. And we're just gonna need that one piece for now. And we're gonna place this face piece about right there. You can check on your pattern again where the outline is. You can line it up or you can eyeball it. Just make sure that you have about a 1/2 inch or so from each side and that you're not too close to the edge, but you should have more of the red bottom than the head seam. So I'm gonna move it down just a little bit and we're gonna pin this in place. So let's take this to the sewing machine. We're gonna do a 1/4 inch seam allowance again, and keep your white thread in if you're using the same colors I am. Make sure when you go all the way around to leave about an inch gap, and I'll show you why. Leaving that 1 inch gap, or 2 finger space, I like to call it, we're going to make sure our needle is in the fabric and lift our presser foot. This is a fun tip that I use a lot, where we're going to stuff the plushie or whatever it is without removing it from the machine. This is gonna save us time and it's gonna make our seam look better. So now get some stuffing, and we're going to stuff this area. The trick about this though is you have to go a little bit at a time because you can't fit a whole lot in the hole. And we're just gonna move it around. It seems about equal throughout the whole thing. We're going to put our presser foot back down and we're gonna sew along this edge again. And here's what that should look like. You can see it has a little bit of depth to it. And don't worry if your outline isn't perfect. We're gonna actually cover it up on this next step. Now we're gonna take our black felt and it's gonna go almost like a frame around our gray piece. Let's go ahead and pin down the black part. Make sure you have enough space on your edges. And if you need to move your stuffing around so that it sticks out a little more, go right ahead. Also make sure that you have a little bit of gray between your reflective piece and the black. Now we're going to switch our thread color over to black so that we can sew around this area. We're going to do a complete circle around the whole outside of the black first, and then we'll sew along the inside. Now we're going to go around the inside part of the black. Now we got the face part done. We're going to grab our other part of our body and we're going to put right sides together. Remember, when you pull, this goes to the wrong side, so this is the right side. And now we know this is the right side, and we're going to put them together and pin them. So we're going to pin it, and we're going to leave one of these inside legs, for the most part, open. So when you sew up a little bit right here, go all the way around, and then stop about right here. So this is open so that we can stuff it. So that you can see where I'm starting, I'm going to start right here and go this way and down and around. And we're still doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now that we are back to our opening, I turn the corner and I'm going to go up just a few stitches and back down. I like to make sure to clip the inside of my corners between the legs, so that way when it turns, it'll turn easier. And I like to trim the corners of the bottom of the feet. Now I can turn it inside out. The easiest way to do this is to open the hole and you can stick your fingers in. And I tried to grab a piece of the fabric that's back this way at the top of the head. And we're just gonna pull it through. Once you got it turned inside out, make sure to go around your seams and make sure you didn't miss anything. And make sure that everything, especially the feet, is poked out. And this is where you can take that more pointy side of your stuffing stick or your chopstick and go in the corners of the feet and punch them out so you get more of that corner. Now that you have the body flipped inside out, it should look something like this. And you can set this aside. We're gonna come back and stuff it later. But for now, we're gonna move on to the backpack. For that, again, you should have 2 of these rectangles and then 1 small skinny rectangle and 1 a little bit shorter tall skinny rectangle. Here's how you're going to assemble it to make the backpack. We're going to take 1 of our bigger rectangles, making sure we are looking at the right side, and we're going to take our 2 longer pieces of the small rectangles and make sure we're looking at the right side of that as well. And with right sides together, we're going to put down the right side to the right side. So face down, these are going to go along the edges. So this is the right side, we're going to place it down like this. And we're going to pin right here along the edge, and we're going to sew straight down, straight down. That way it'll open up like this, kind of like a pamphlet. Now that we have our pamphlet sewn up, we're gonna make this into a 3D box. So now we take our shorter pieces, find the right sides, place them down, one at the top, find the right sides, place it down, one at the bottom. And we're gonna pin these down as well. If your piece extends along past these two seams, that's okay, just sew from one seam to the other. So we're gonna sew from here to here. You do not have to go all the way to the end of this fabric. Now we have something that looks like a flat box. So to make it a 3D box, we're going to sew these corners together. As you can see, this is a little bit longer, so kind of just do what the fabric feels right. If I try to bring this, you can see it like over, it makes a weird corner. So I want it to be even, so we can cut off this extra, or we can just go ahead and pin it and then cut it off later. So now we get like this little tray. Let's sew these corners up and then I'll show you the last little bit. Make sure that you're seeing where I'm sewing. I like to push my finger down here so that I'm making sure not to catch the corner of the inside, but we want to sew right along this line. And you can sew directly into that corner. All right, now we have our tray. This is the last part that we're going to machine sew, and it is probably the most tricky one to sew. So again, we're gonna put our right sides together. This is our right side, and we're going to pin the edges together. So we're gonna put a pin here at the top. Then we're gonna try to match our corners and we're gonna put a pin on this side. Match our corners here. Put a pin at the bottom. And again, you can pin this more if you want. Whatever you're comfortable with. Match your corners. And we're gonna pin this side. So the top and the bottom, they're basically the same. I just like to make sure on my shorter sides, that's where I start sewing because that's where we're going to stuff it from. And we like to hide our holes where we stuff at the bottom or behind things usually. So I'm gonna start down here. And you wanna make sure that you're pushing all of this other part under here behind. Make sure that it's not like folded over or caught anywhere, especially when we go to round these corners. So when you're feeding it through the machine, make sure all of this is tucked, including this bottom corner. So I'm gonna start about in the middle of my square. Gonna make sure my corners are lined up. And we're gonna do that 1/4 inch seam allowance. When we get to the corner, we're going to pick up our presser foot, and I want you to make sure that all of this is tucked away when we go to turn this corner. The only thing I want you to make sure that you catch is this other layer below. So make sure when you pivot, all of that is tucked back under there, and only get this top layer and this one bottom layer. And then go down the line. And our other corners coming up, we're gonna do the same thing. Line our corners up, make sure this is tucked down. Get to the corner, lift your presser foot, tuck all this back, grab that underneath piece to make sure that it is lined up and ready to go. Leave about 2 finger width space from our presser foot, and this is where we're going to stuff. Go ahead and grab one of these inside corners so that you can turn it inside out. This is going to be a lot easier to turn inside out than the body. And just make sure that you press all these little corners out so that it looks like a box. All right, now you're done with the machine sewing. Now we're going to stuff these two pieces. Let's start with the body piece. When we start stuffing the body piece, I like to start stuffing with the leg that doesn't have the hole in it. And we start over here and build up and around and back down. So let's start stuffing. I like to take about this size amount of stuffing. Make sure you fluff it, especially if you get a big bag of stuffing, and pop it in there and maneuver it over to the other side. Let me take my rings off. This is where you can get your stuffing stick, and make sure that you get it in the corners of the feet. Make sure when you're stuffing that you're blending the stuffing that's already in there with the new stuffing that you're putting in. You don't want this to be clumpy. You want it to all be uniform together. Here's what your little guy should look like. If his legs look really long and skinny, you might have cut the fabric with the stretch going this way instead of this way. So it's okay, he probably still looks adorable, but next time you go to make him, just make sure your stretch is the width way so that he comes out wider and not long and skinny. So once you're done stuffing the body, set this aside. We're going to stuff the backpack. Now here's the backpack. Let's stuff it. It's going to be a lot simpler. Just make sure you get those corners. Okay, once you feel like your backpack is good and stuffed and square, or rectangle, I guess, we're gonna move on to the hand sewing. For our hand sewing technique, we're gonna be using a ladder stitch. We're gonna be using it to sew up the inside of our leg, the backpack, and to sew the backpack onto the plush. So if you don't know what a ladder stitch is, make sure to check out this short, either here or here, that I created to do a simple ladder stitch. Once I've sewed up the inside of my plush, it should look something like this. Here's hopefully a little easier way to see the ladder stitch. You're gonna hide your knot inside, grab the side, and then go in and out the other side. Now we're going to attach the backpack to the back of our plush. By doing this, make sure that your stitching where you sewed up your backpack is at the bottom of the plush. That way it hides it better. And you're going to kind of line up the backpack with the bottom of the body. It should look something like this. You don't want to be able to see the backpack through the legs. And you want to make sure it's not right at the top of the head. We're going to do a ladder stitch, connecting these two pieces together all the way around the backpack and the plush. So I like to stick a pin at the top of this just to hold the backpack on. That way it doesn't move while I'm sewing it. To do a ladder stitch where you're connecting two pieces, start by taking a little bit of one side to catch your knot, and then go across to the other thing that you're connecting and go in and back out to grab a little bit. Pull it, and you're going to go right back across to the other plush and pull. And it's going to create a ladder effect. And that's why they call it the ladder stitch. And you're going to keep doing this back and forth, where it'll look something like that. And you're going to pull your fabric as you go so that it makes a clean edge. And we're going to do this all the way around the plush.
You did it! You're all done! You made an Among Us plush. Now go make mini colors and accessories of the like. I hope you had a great time making this with me. I hope you make many more Among Us plushies. And if you do use my pattern, please make sure to tag me in it or let other people know that it was my pattern so that they can find it and make some more plushies. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!